This is day 24 of the overall inquiry, and today should be our final day, and we're considering the conditions and obligations or agreements in the event that permission and consent is granted. Before moving on to that, can phones and any other devices be silenced? I also noted over the weekend that the tips that we were provided with on Friday didn't turn out to be that successful. Came last and second last, I'm informed. So,
Sir, I have to differ with you. We were third last.
Third last, well, I apologise. Before moving on to consider the conditions and so on, are there any other overall issues that anyone has to raise?
So there's still the outstanding matter about the lift shaft issue, which hopefully will be our production 766. Mr. Innes was going to reflect over the weekend. In light of his defeat, he may be prepared to concede this point.
Mr. Innes.
Yes, sir. I'm content for the document to be submitted to you, but will wish the opportunity in submission to identify other factors which influence headroom in the lift shaft, and that would include lift speed, balustrades, lift size, and the lift equipment of a non-machine room nature, which are all factors which would also come into play in relation to the headroom above the carriage. So I'm happy for it to be submitted, but on the basis that I will be given an opportunity to respond to that in submission.
That seems reasonable to me.
That seems very reasonable, sir. And in turn, obviously, because my speech is later, I can respond to any points that are made. So that seems entirely reasonable.
So will that be submitted electronically to the office then? I don't think we need to see that today in hard copy.
Whatever you prefer, okay. Sir. 766 in any event is the number.
Perfect. Any other issues? Mr. Thompson.
I just have one very minor factual matter, sir. You'll recall the evidence on, when it was Friday or Thursday, from Carla Parks about the hotel, or sorry, the conversion of the Bank of Scotland building in St Andrews Square, and an issue of whether it was a hotel or a members' club. We've checked the register, and the application and the report to committee are for conversion to a hotel. How it's used thereafter, anybody's guess, but so far as the planning status is concerned, it's hotel use.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Steele.
Well, sir, in truth, I'm not sure that anything turns on the matter, but for the avoidance of doubt, I have here a note of instruction which says that it's actually a private members' club associated with Gleneagles Hotel. And curiously, although this isn't evidence, there was something in the paper about it on Saturday.
That, in fact. Okay, well, we've noted the positions of both parties. So are we ready to move on to the conditions? Okay, I feel slightly underprepared. Very underprepared, in fact, because we prepared yesterday on the basis of the hearing statements that had been lodged some time ago. There are now 4 new sets of conditions containing quite a number of additional conditions which we obviously haven't yet had time to read properly or digest. So thinking about the best way to proceed, probably just to start with the planning permissions, the earliest one first. We can work through those spreadsheets, condition by condition, and where there's disagreement between the parties, we can have a discussion on that. Would it be appropriate for someone from the Council to take us through condition by condition, or were they drafted primarily by the appellants?
I think they originated from the Council. I would be happy to do that. Mr. Bruce Nicholson is sitting beside me, and he's probably the person best able to walk us through, as it were.
Perfect. And obviously other parties, where there's comment or disagreement, should just make us aware of that. Mr. Steele, are you happy with that?
Very happy with that, sir. As you will note from the comments, there are actually very few comments from us. The majority of comments, curiously, seem to come from other parties.
Perfect. Okay, and obviously other parties should feel free also to comment where appropriate. Mr. Thompson.
Good morning. Condition number 1 relates to the requirement for the securing and implementation of an archaeological programme of works. This is a standard condition which would be appropriate for a building of this importance, and that is to ensure that we gather information on the archaeological heritage of the building.
Perfect. Any comments from anyone else on this? Mrs. Cunliffe.
The point that one of our members raised was that a condition requiring the proper recording and analysis of all aspects of the site, i.e. including buildings and features to be demolished, equivalent to the former RCHME 1996 HBR standards level 3 or above. We think that there should be more on the buildings, not just the archaeology.
I think the wording of this condition does include the recording of the building, so my interpretation would be that that matter would be covered.
Sir, I'm just a little confused, and I want to check my understanding. Are we working on PPA-230-2178 at the moment?
I thought we were on 2178.
Yeah, brilliant. Because there seems to be a difference in the first line of this condition between 2213 and 2178, in that 2213 has including demolition after no development. Now, it's not my. I'm just confused, and I wondered that those sort of differences. There are a few of them as we go along. Could be picked up.
Any reason for that?
I'm trying to think why there is a different wording. It is a very valid point. I would suggest that it would be appropriate to incorporate the including demolition element within both of those conditions for completeness.
Okay, thanks for that. Just as a general point, if there are to be alterations to these conditions as we go along, we will try to capture it, but it might be useful for us at the end of the session, if these schedules were prepared on behalf of the Council for updated versions to be provided to us and the other parties. I think that would be useful.
The second condition seeks to obtain information on the detailed specification of materials, including trade names of all the external materials, and that is to allow the Planning Authority to give further consideration to the exact specification of each of the building materials that is proposed. And the third condition really relates to the same issue, where we are seeking to view sample panels of these materials prior to agreeing the exact specification.
Okay.
Moving on to the fourth condition, that is a condition that specifically relates to the pre-patinated copper cladding panel, which is located on the site at the time of the site visit, and that is to ensure that that material matches the sample panel which we have already considered.
And that's the same panel that was on site during our site inspection?
That's correct.
Same one.
Condition 5, relating to samples of the masonry work, is to ensure that we have the opportunity to consider the exact detailing of the proposed masonry work, including elements such as the stone coursing and the surface finish, etc. That's again to allow us further consideration of that detailed issue.
Should that condition include that the stonework should be constructed in accordance with that panel, or to match that panel? So maybe I shouldn't be asking the question.
Yes, I would agree that it needs an implementation clause to ensure that it's implemented in accordance with the agreed treatment. Moving on to condition number 6, which relates to various noise protection measures which are defined within the applicant's environmental statement. This is a condition to ensure that the amenity of neighbouring residents would be safeguarded, and there are various technical standards which are set out within that condition to ensure that there is a suitable level of protection.
Excuse me, can I ask a question about that? As the representative for the residents' body, we are obviously quite concerned about noise, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask if we have a time schedule for noise through the working day and the working week, and if the noise protection measures are an average measure of levels during a 24-hour period, because this could still result in significant nuisance to adjoining properties, that we feel that we should, I don't know if there should be more technical detail there and time limitations for noise.
Do you mean working hours?
Yeah, there should be some quiet time that through the 24-hour period.
During operation or construction, do you mean?
Well, is this from the construction? Yes, as well, similarly. And it connects later on to I think it's in the informatives about deliveries for night work, and so somewhere we need a link in that, in theory there should be no night work, and noise levels generally.
Any comment on that from the council?
I think in terms of protecting the amenity of neighbours during the operation of the hotel, condition number 6 and 7 relating to the NR25 measurement within residential property, that we would be satisfied, having consulted our colleagues in environmental assessment, that these would be sufficient measures to protect neighbouring amenity within an urban context. The construction issue is a slightly different matter. So I think these two conditions, in conjunction with the statutory legislation on noise nuisance, would be adequate to safeguard amenity.
Before we move on, I mentioned in the spreadsheet, which was circulated yesterday, that obviously when Mr Price was giving evidence about the door in Scheme 2, Mr Steele asked him in cross-examination whether these issues that Mr Price was concerned about could be addressed by conditions. And I just wonder whether there was any proposals from the appellants for such a condition. We haven't been able to think of one, but it may be they have a suggestion.
Is this in relation to noise issues?
Well, I don't know where to put it, so I thought I'd raise it now, because it relates to the noise. I suppose there was discussion of the vehicles arriving and departing. Chiller units was mentioned by one witness, and I suppose there's an amount of clatter you get. So it may not be the appropriate place to mention it, but I feel since it was raised as a question to Mr Price, it would be interesting to see what condition could address that problem.
Maybe it would be better and more straightforward to run through the conditions that we have and then pick up any that may be missing or that some are missing at the end.
Absolutely, I'm in your hands. I just wanted
rather than lose the
because
the thread of what
I
we're doing.
appreciate that's a risk. That's why I raise it now.
Yep.
Sorry, can I please go back to this? Only because I understand what Mr Nicholson was saying about the statutory legislation, but I know, as we live very close also to the St James's Quarter, that they had strict days of working and strict timings on most days, and that we were notified of that. I don't know if this is something that comes. I don't know who would be in charge of this. If this
during construction, or
at the moment,
about
yeah. It was very much a Monday, Friday, and limited hours, and they told us if there was to be any variance.
I think there is a condition for operational noise or working times. Can't find it.
Was it an informative?
Maybe there isn't.
Informative 15.
Times, was it?
No.
Well, so far I've noticed informative 15 talks about construction noise. But we're struggling slightly because there seem to be two versions of the spreadsheet that we're looking at. If you'll allow me a moment to try to get to the bottom of that one.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, if it assists, we have seen nothing in the draft conditions about hours of either construction or delivery.
Could I suggest that we just use the St James's Quarter hours and days and move that directly over, which I think is... I mean, I take it this would be a condition by the council rather than leaving it to the developer.
My understanding is the St James application has got a condition which relates to the Construction Environmental Management Plan, which sets out the hours of construction that is consented. The Construction Environmental Management Plan is a working document that can evolve during the process of construction and allows for exceptional circumstances, etc., pouring of concrete. So I would be comfortable with using a condition that required a Construction Environmental Management Plan to set out the hours of construction that would be applicable for this site.
I think I might have seen mention of a CAMP somewhere in the schedule.
Amenity issues for neighbours.
Which condition was that, Ms Parks?
Just hunting for it. Sorry. Condition 30. Sorry.
It just says in order to ensure
Yes,
ecological impact.
Ecological, yeah.
That's 23, isn't it?
That's slightly different, that one, isn't it?
Looks a bit confused.
But that's that.
Yes, 24 needs to get that at the time.
Oh, it's there.
So the document that we're considering at the moment has got an additional condition number 23 towards the end of this list. If you see that, the reason that is used for condition number 3 references the Construction Environmental Management Plan.
I think it might just be the way that it's been printed. I think condition 24 is meant to begin with, before the development commences, a finalised construction environmental management plan. It looks fine on the screen, but not on the print.
I think you're correct. Thank you very much.
So the question is, does that condition need to be widened to cover the issues of construction and noise and so on?
That would sound appropriate, yes.
Okay. Any comments on that, Mr. Steele?
None, sir.
Okay.
I apologise because I am a complete layperson at this, but I wasn't sure where to raise it, and this might help. Is the planning document, I think it's CD 462, which mentions the Good Neighbour Agreement. And I'm not quite sure, if that gets built in as a condition that there is such a thing, and that might be something that can iron out lots of problems with a body that helps locals with amenity. I'm sorry, I don't know quite where that would slip into the proceedings.
Bit late to be raising that now, I would say. Good neighbour agreements, in our experience, tend not to be used. They hardly ever have been used, in fact. And I think the issues that you're concerned about around disturbance and noise during construction and then potentially through deliveries and so on during the period of operation, I think the council is, it's our experience that these things normally would be covered under that type of condition. Certainly during the construction period, the hours of operation and method of construction and so on would be controlled by the council through the Construction Environmental Management Plan. Yeah. That doesn't get us around the issue of deliveries and so on that Mr. McIntosh has raised, though. So we'll pick that up. Yeah. Okay, so I think on condition 6 the council will expand the scope of that.
Yes.
And clearly when that's produced, the appellants will have the opportunity to comment on that draft condition.
Okay, so condition number 7 relating to the NR25 is for the same reason as we have referenced the previous conditions in terms of safeguarding of neighbouring amenity from the operation of the hotel. And similarly, condition number 8, which relates to secondary abatement technology in relation to any proposed gas power energy plant, and that is similarly to safeguard neighbouring amenity and also to ensure the control of any impact on local air quality.
I'm very sorry. Here I am again. I had added in, I think, on our column here about the prevailing westerly wind, which is most definitely prevailing along that sort of corridor, which, you know, would prevailing winds be included in the consideration for this? It certainly moves from the Royal High School to the terraces.
We would be taking advice from colleagues in environmental assessment who deal with issues of this nature, and I would anticipate that they would give due consideration to any climate or microclimate issues within that area.
Okay, just looking at the column on CEC comments, what does the Council mean there by not a true condition precedent?
Written by another colleague who's not here today. But
okay, should we just disregard that for the purposes of today?
I think so, if everyone else is
okay.
satisfied with it.
Okay, condition 9.
Condition 9 relates to the control of external lighting. This is considered to be appropriate due to the sensitivity of the site, as has been discussed at length, and it's really to ensure that there is an appropriate lighting strategy given consideration and put in place that is suitable for this special location.
When you talk about external lighting, and we've had evidence about the interior room lighting and how that might have a visual impact from various viewpoints, is that something that's, I don't think it's covered by this condition. I'm assuming that, certainly in the list of conditions we had yesterday, I couldn't find a condition on that. Is it proposed that that be controlled by condition at all?
It's not proposed, and I think it would be extremely difficult to control internal lighting arrangements. I think the design of the building is as it's proposed, and there would be a degree of light pollution that would be expected from that, and I think it would be very difficult for us to control when the lights go off and on within these new structures, essentially.
I was recalling some evidence on the method of lighting and the particular technology to be used and so on. Anything that the appellants can add on this issue?
So my recollection, without looking at the document again, is that there was some mention of a lighting strategy in relation to the trust scheme. I can look at the report on that for further detail. It's a matter for the Council, ultimately, sir.
I think I might have been the person who asked the questions about this, and my recollection is there is a lighting notebook. I'm looking at the number whilst I speak. And I asked some questions of a witness, I think it might have been Mr. Gibb, about how it could be controlled, and I think I remember asking questions about darkness of walls. So my view is I agree that it probably can't be controlled, but I'll find the number for you and then sing it out in a moment, just
Perfect.
to assist.
Perfect.
design forms part of CD 46.
Thanks for that, Mr. Mackay. So the question is, how are we to rely on what's said in those strategies and notebooks? Is that to be controlled by condition or not? Is it capable of being controlled by condition?
I think our view is that that is not capable of being controlled reasonably by a condition.
Is that the appellant's position, Mr.
Well, sir, ultimately we'll leave it to you, but that is curious because if you look at document CD 757, being the report committee in connection with the trust scheme, at page 29 of 97, the following appears under the heading Light Pollution. The relevant design and access statement includes a lighting strategy for the site. However, full details are not available as part of the formal plans. A condition is therefore recommended to require the submission of this information for approval in order to safeguard residential amenity as well as heritage interests. We are content, sir, to leave the matter with you. But,
our understanding would be that that's to control the external lighting, not the internal.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've probably taken this one as far as we can. Back to you, Mr. Nicholson, for condition 10.
Condition 10 is a fairly standard condition to ensure the implementation and maintenance of the landscaping proposals that are submitted as part of the scheme. And condition 11 relates to just clarifying the extent of the tree works that would be allowed and the tree protection that is required during the construction. And similarly, condition 12 is specifically outlining the inclusion of tree protection fencing around the retained trees on the site and within the adjacent land to ensure that those trees are maintained and protected during the construction period. Moving on to the condition number 13, which relates to options for rock pre-treatment options, and this is to ensure that we effectively control the removal of and work to rocks to ensure that the integrity of the site and Arthur's Seat are indeed safeguarded. And condition 14 also refers to the methodology programme for rock extraction and ensuring that the works is carried out in association or as per the approved scheme, and this is again to ensure the safeguarding of the special interest of Calton Hill. I think we would like to add within the reasoning there that it is appropriate to also add condition 13 and 14 to ensure that the building itself is not damaged during the rock extraction, and indeed the railway tunnels underneath are safeguarded, and we would expect a methodology that would demonstrate that that would be the case through these two conditions.
Can I ask if the terraces are included in the sense of Calton Hill with regard to effect from rock extraction? I was covering this in the LBC because it's mentioned there that it's not a condition, so I'm not sure where it becomes a condition with possible effect to one Regent Terrace and the rest of the terraces.
we wouldn't anticipate that these two conditions would extend to neighbouring properties. I would expect that that would be a matter for the developer and neighbouring landowners to discuss and enter into any agreement that they felt was reasonable. It's normal practice that the developer may seek to put measures in place, or indeed monitoring equipment in place on adjacent properties to ensure that there is adequate monitoring of the construction, but that is indeed a matter for the developer and the neighbouring landowners to consider.
Anything to add on that?
So just one thing to add. It was suggested to add to the reason about the railway tunnels. In fact, the reality is that we will require to formalise our agreement that we already have with Network Rail. That will have very, very stringent requirements in relation to the railway tunnels. And I'm not sure that that is an issue for a planning condition, because there'll be a completely separate a bundle of legislation and considerations dealing with that issue, sir. And actually that will be the controlling factor, the truth be told.
I tend to agree with that. I think that element of it probably doesn't meet the test of necessity, given that it will be covered elsewhere. Although we take your point about protecting the building itself, I think that would fall squarely in this condition.
Happy to accept that.
Sir, likely there'll be additional protection for neighbours through other legislation as well. I don't think because it's not included in the site condition that you'd suddenly be exposed to all the vibration. I'm sure that the developers would have to take account of neighbouring properties.
Mr. McKay.
Yes, sir. I don't think there's big issues, but just for my clarity, when conditions 13 and 14 refer to methodology programme being approved, I wonder whether that's strictly correct. Is it simply the methodology that's to be approved, and not a programme for the production of a methodology? And maybe just a question of accuracy of wording. That's the first query.
Sorry. That would really, because there's a stage, as far as I can remember, it's a staged process. You do the trials first of all, and then look at that and see which of those are the most suitable methodology. So we just want that set out clearly, because there would need to be stages during that where SNH would also be consulted. So it's just really to set that out fully and have that agreed in advance.
But ultimately, the purpose of the condition is to have the methodology approved, not the programme for the final selection of the methodology.
I think that's probably the case. If it, maybe have time to think about that first of all before reaching.
Just possibly needs deletion of the word programme. Is that?
Oh yes, yeah. Okay.
I would have anticipated that the methodology would have contained some form of programme
for the works. Yeah. It would be part of it anyway.
So I'm happy to be guided either way.
Any comment on that?
Yeah, I'm wondering, it's an SNH suggested condition, is it? Is it something they'd have put to you? I'm just wondering what the true purpose of this is. It says it's to ensure the integrity of Arthur's Sea site of special scientific interest. I'm not quite sure what the link is. How would that be effective?
Well, I think that there's not a decision taken, as I understand it, at the moment on what the selected methodology would be. It would be dependent on what's found when initial investigations are carried out. So it's really relating back to the environmental statement and the programme set out in that as to the suggested way of doing that. I think if we wanted to reword it, we'd need to go back to that just to be sure that it's consistent with it.
I think that's worth checking just to make sure that it makes sense.
Can I just confirm my understanding of the position? I think the conditions as originally drafted did have as their focus the SSSI as set out in the reasons. it was fairly identified earlier that needed to be broadened somewhat to include the Hamilton building itself. And the reason for that is quite important, sir. If you look at CD 15, which is the 2015 ES, at paragraphs 9.9.20, and also the very foot of table 9.5, you will see that, which is on page 9-23, that's table 9.5 on page 9-23, you'll see that the Royal High School itself is identified as a sensitive structure that might be affected by rock extraction. And when we come to the listed building draft conditions, you'll see that Historic Environment Scotland has suggested there were conditions related to that. This may remove the need for such conditions. But the point is that in the issue of the Hamilton building and the integrity of the building, the foundations, the boundary walls and their foundations, they should be featured in the conditions themselves and not simply the reason. If the reasons are to be broadened out, that's good news as far as HES is concerned. But of course, the conditions themselves have to make it clear that that's also an additional focus to the purpose of conditions 13 and 14. And the only other query I had about 13 and 14, sir, is whether more should be said as to what is expected in the methodology. For example, is it to include details of the plant and equipment, of the British standards that are to be adhered to, and of the actual rock extraction techniques themselves, and particular vibration and that sort of thing. That may be the sort of condition that the Council envisage, but it'd be useful to have their thoughts on that, and if they can give some considerations to how the conditions should be adjusted to make that more clear, insofar as the sensitivity of the building itself is concerned.
Any comments on that, Mr Nicholson? It would normally be intended that things like plant and methods of working and so on would be included in the methodological statement itself rather than in the condition, unless it's considered to be known and appropriate to do it at this stage.
I think I would agree with you, and I would be slightly concerned about making the condition too tight that it perhaps missed particular issues at this point. I think it's appropriate to have a condition that's slightly broader that ensures that we can encompass all of these issues within the consideration of that information that's brought forward.
So we would agree with that. Selected methodology must, by definition, include the method, plant and equipment, and so on and so forth, and it gives the Council greater flexibility. So we're very comfortable with that, if you are, sir.
Okay. Thanks. Mr Nicholson.
We're on condition number 15 now, which relates to the public footway and carriageway works, and this is a condition that seeks additional detail for our approval in relation to these works, including street lighting, drainage, SUDs and materials and the layout and such like, material specification. So this is really to ensure that we have additional detail in respect of the public realm works that are proposed, and that is to ensure we have the opportunity to agree that detail to a suitable standard. And condition number 16 really is simply a condition to ensure that that work is implemented to a suitable standard.
Are those works happening within the red line boundary?
Yes, I believe they are, yes. I think certainly are in the second scheme, and I believe they are in the first two, yes.
Moving on to condition 17, which looks for full details of the underground storage tanks, as these are not shown in sufficient detail within the drawings for consideration at this point in time. So this is to ensure that we have the opportunity to consider their location and the extent of these, and consult with our colleagues in environmental assessment to ensure that they are to our satisfaction. Condition 18, as I understand it, is a condition that is proposed by the appellant to control the number of bedrooms within the hotel, obviously seeking to restrict that to not exceeding 147 in the case of this application. And the reason stated is to ensure that the hotel would remain as a world-class hotel in accordance with the original design. I think our comment in respect of that condition is that the number of hotels, bedrooms, and indeed the size of those hotel bedrooms is one component of what determines the type of hotel, but it would have its limitations in terms of how it could indeed deliver any particular class of hotel. So I think we would be leaving it to yourself, sir, to determine whether that had any merit in controlling the actual delivery of a world-class hotel as opposed to any other class of hotel.
Would you know, I'm just thinking about the test of necessity here. Would the appellants or the hotel operators subsequently need permission to increase the number of bedrooms in the hotel or not? Through internal works, I'm thinking about.
I think the internal alterations of a hotel is very unlikely to require planning permission. Obviously, alterations to the historic building may require listed building consent, but the actual alterations to the bedroom accommodation, I would think, would be very unlikely to require any application.
And you make comment there about condition limiting the size of the rooms would be more appropriate. We don't have a draft condition along those lines.
I think the size of the rooms ultimately is kind of related to any restriction you put on the number of rooms. The sizes as they are proposed at the moment. It is one factor that has an influence over the quality of a hotel, but there are indeed a near endless number of factors which would influence the quality of a hotel, and perhaps the difference between a 5- and 6-star hotel is something that we feel uncomfortable with indeed controlling through any condition.
So the Council's position on this condition isn't that it doesn't meet the test for conditions or that it's somehow ultra vires, but just that we shouldn't place reliance on that condition in terms of providing the standard or quality of hotel that the appellants propose.
I think we'd be concerned about imposing a condition that was known at the outset not to be capable of being effective. One can imagine that the necessity tests could be met in certain circumstances, but it would have to meet all the other conditions of reasonableness and enforceability and so on, and that's where our concern would lie.
Which of the tests do you think that condition would fail to meet?
Probably enforceability and effectiveness, which would then constitute reasonableness.
Mr. Steele?
So just on that last point, I would have thought it would be entirely enforceable whether there is or is not 147 rooms or more. So I think that's an easy answer to that. So far as the second point about effectiveness, I'm not absolutely certain that's one of the purposes of the conditions or one of the requirements of the circular on conditions, To be fair, I haven't looked at it. I may be wrong, but I don't recollect that.
It's not one of the tests, that's
No.
right.
And, sir, our purpose here is to try to give comfort that this will indeed be a world-class luxury hotel in the way that we have indicated and given our evidence, sir. And we thought that it may be useful to you to have a limit either upwards or downwards on the number of rooms to ensure that a concern has been expressed that this could be double the size of rooms and go into a budget, backpackers or something similar. So we're trying to guard against that possibility. But we do take the point, sir, as well, that it might give greater comfort about limiting the size of rooms, and actually I would go further, the number of suites, because we have led evidence about that, and we have proposed a particular size of rooms and numbers of suites, and it would be quite easy to tie that back to the relevant floor plan drawings showing the rooms and the suites consistent with our evidence. And my submission, this indeed would meet the terms of the circular if you thought it appropriate of necessity, reasonableness, etc., in the particular circumstances of this unusual case. In terms of whether consent may be required if there was a change in the number of rooms, I would suggest it may be a moot point because, of course, these two hotel wings will become A-listed by virtue of being in the curtilage and adjoining the main building. And certainly the advice in relation to internal alterations in listed buildings, particularly, I suppose, A-listed buildings, relates to the perception from the outside and so on and so forth. So it may very well be that consent of some form or description might be required, but regardless of that, we're perfectly happy with a condition or a couple of conditions to try to restrict the matter to ensure as far as we humanly can that this will indeed be a world-class luxury hotel.
Although, I take your point, but this wouldn't really be a consideration for a listed building consent application. So I think if we felt it had to be captured one way or another, it would need to be within the planning conditions. Given that the Council is going to have to provide a further iteration of this schedule of conditions, I think if you could...
Sir, sorry, we put a comment in on this issue.
Yes.
Sorry, Ronald.
Let me finish here just now. I will come back to you, Mr McIntosh. If the appellants can feed their, without commenting on whether this is something that we will find necessary or acceptable, if you could feed those conditions on room sizes and number of suites into the work that the Council's doing on updating that schedule of conditions as potential alternative or additional conditions. Mr McIntosh.
I thought you were summing up on this condition. So my concern relates, weirdly, to the, in a sense, if we're on the assumption that you have, by this point, decided to grant permission, and therefore we're looking at conditions that are designed to protect interests that are legitimate at the stage, given the appellant's arguments in their appeal statement, you would have already concluded either there was no heritage effect, in which case my point is completely irrelevant, or that this was a hotel of national or regional economic importance. And that must, I suspect, involve it being a high-tone hotel, to adopt Mr. Kett's language. So if the purpose of this condition is to protect the tone, in my submission, the discussion that it doesn't do that is valid, but also, in the event of a realisation on the part of the operator, whoever that ends up being, that it was they couldn't maintain a tone, they would have to operate under the lease which we've seen part of. And if we look in that document, CD 650, at the draft lease, and if later on you have a look at clauses 23.6.3 and 23.6.4, they provide a mechanism by which the landlord and the tenant can resolve these issues. And the only reason I'm referring to it as appears to suggest that this must be done by obtaining planning permission first and then obtaining the landlord's consent. So there's never going to be an issue of enforcement here, because if the tenant is complying with the draft lease, they will do it right. They will apply for planning permission. At the moment they apply for planning permission, they'll presumably have the evidence that they have to have for the landlord, which includes things like business plans and projections and consultants' reports. And given that we've seen a number of hotel experts, we can sort of feel for a feel what those sort of documents might say. So at that stage, the planning authority will have to decide whether to accede to the presumably a Section 42 application to change the internal layout. There will be no heritage impact, I can see conceivably, to change the internal layout of the new build buildings. There might be if you wanted to stick rooms in the whiskey bar, but ignoring that for a moment. So if there's no heritage impact, to be slightly glib about it, the past has been sold. So if the ministers or yourselves have decided that, yes, there was a heritage harm, in shorthand, caused by this scheme, but there was a national regional impact which justified it, that when it then later became clear, or if it later became clear, as it says here, that a high-quality hotel of international standing, as aforesaid, will not be commercially viable, at that moment, there's no heritage protection, because the planning authority would almost certainly simply have to grant permission, because there's no reason, unless there's some huge amount of transport issues or noise, or they're going to have roof parties, there isn't a heritage reason to oppose it. So if the purpose of the condition is to protect Mr. Kett's tone, it doesn't do that. It's entirely ineffective. And I realise that is a slightly circular argument, goes back to the principles, but that, I can't see how, at the end of the day, it can achieve what the appellants perhaps understandably wanted to achieve.
It may be a difference between achieving and controlling. What we're talking about is what conditions should or could reasonably control. I've noted that. Yeah. Any comments on that, Mr. Steele, before we move on?
Well, simply, sir, that my learned friend's proposition seemed to turn on the fact that we would require another planning application. If that is right, then, which is a separate point altogether to dealing about the conditions, which is what we're doing now. But if that were to be right, then the matter is easily solved by the local authority refusing it. I don't see what the difficulty is.
Sir, one obvious point is the matter about the suites and the number of rooms does not alter the fact that you could fit more people into the rooms and beds, etc., and the whole tone would utterly change in terms of what it was purporting to be. Double bunk beds could be added into the suites, and therefore the occupancy could be utterly altered. I don't see how this actually defines a development unless you're also defining the occupancy, because that's ultimately what defines the tone, is that the suite is occupied by a relatively few number of people rather than becoming something larger. So what I'm struggling to see is how this actually achieves a purpose of protecting a particular planning objective.
Okay, that's noted. Mr. Nicholson.
Sorry, can I just add to that? I think that is a perfectly valid point. We could be looking at bunk beds in all of these rooms and changing that. And I think from reading the appellant's information, it is really the level of service is ultimately the thing that would differentiate this product from a five-star hotel. It's the experience of the people that stay there and the level of service that they would be provided with. And I don't think that that is something that sits comfortably within the tests of the circular in terms of constructing any type of condition that would be able to ensure that that level of service was provided.
So can I just respond to that briefly? If that is really a serious point about bunk beds, then that can easily be resolved by an appropriate condition about the maximum occupancy in a room, if that were really truly a serious point, rather than just nitpicking.
Okay, let's move on.
Just before leaving that, you asked me a very pointed question about which of the 6 conditions.
Yes.
And just thinking about it, I suppose that if it's ineffective, then it's not serving a planning purpose, which plainly is one of the 6, and that may be the way to view it. One would have to think of what was the planning purpose in imposing a condition, and then ask oneself whether it was actually achieving that or not.
Okay. So I would submit the answer to that is a simple one. The planning purpose is securing the economic benefits from the 7-star luxury hotel of the type that we've laid evidence about. that must be so.
Okay. Mr. Neal.
Condition 19 relates to the Thomas Hamilton building and seeking to restrict the use of that building so that it should not be used for bedroom accommodation. And the reason, this is a condition proposed by the appellant, the reason for that would be to ensure that there is publicly accessible or available space within the development. I think whilst that could be a condition that could be used, I think the proposal does not include any bedrooms within the Thomas Hamilton building, and therefore I would have thought it was inherently unnecessary. Given
Would the creation of hotel rooms in the Hamilton building need subsequent planning permission?
Planning, I would have thought not. Listed building, I would anticipate, if we are talking about fairly substantial rooms, so I would expect that there would be an element of subdivision or indeed en-suite facilities provided within those rooms, and therefore there would be some impact on the historic fabric, and therefore listed building consent I would anticipate being required, but not indeed planning permission. Unless there was a case where we thought it was materially changing the operation of the hotel. I can't think of a case where that would be such.
Okay. And I've noted your comments on this one too, Mr. McIntosh.
Simply a general comment. There's an inconsistency here between the desire to control the use of the hotel and at the same time the desire to have public access. And I think it probably needs to be explored by all of us in submissions, but I just flag it as well.
Okay. Nothing more on that, Mr. Steele?
So unless you want me to, again, it's with a view to securing what we've said in terms of the luxury hotel.
Yeah. Okay. Condition 20.
So this relates to the arts and culture strategy, and is seeking to essentially set out how we would agree an arts and culture strategy and how that would be delivered within the hotel. I think whilst we could look at an arts and culture strategy, I think fundamentally we are talking about a hotel and a luxury hotel, so we need to give consideration as to how reasonable it is to require that of a hotel, and why indeed would it be necessary for it to be required within any hotel regardless of the status of the hotel. So without getting into the detail of what an arts and culture strategy might comprise, I think we've got significant reservations as to how it would meet the tests of the circular.
But if such a condition was to be included, you would look for the amendments in blue here in relation to timescale and so on.
That's correct. I think that would be our suggestion as to how that could be structured as a condition if you felt it was necessary.
Any comments on that, Mr. Steele?
Well, sir, firstly, I note that the Council's comment on it is that the condition is appropriate in their column. Secondly, of course, the Council in the design brief, and going back to the original local plan requirements, required something of this nature to be included within the proposed development. So it quite clearly, according to the Council at least, does have a planning purpose. And we have led some detailed evidence about the arts and cultural strategy and the ability of the public to come and participate in that. So again, there is clearly a planning purpose, and it is intended, it was proposed by us, sir, it's intended to give greater comfort that this will actually be delivered in the way that we've indicated in evidence that it will be. At the end of the day, sir, it's a matter for you, but it does seem surprising that the Council, against the background of this matter, the competition, the requirement for just this sort of thing to happen, are now saying that it's not necessary or appropriate, particularly when they say in their written comment it is appropriate. So I simply leave it with you, sir.
Just on that...
Sorry, apologies. There's one matter which I forgot. The first couple of words say no development shall commence. I think that's an error. I think, in fact, it should be the hotel shall not open for business or the operation shall not commence, because there might be a year or two in between when we're working up our arts and cultural strategy, if you follow me, after the first pickaxe strikes the ground. Apologies.
Okay, I've noted that. Mr Nicholson, just on the point about, I think Mr Steele's right, it does seem to indicate in the Council's column that you think the condition is appropriate.
I accept that, and I can only say that that wasn't my drafting of the response to that tabled condition. I think, from what Mr Steele has said, this condition seeks to try and deliver what is included within the development brief for this site. But that ultimately was seeking to deliver uses which included cultural uses, potentially. And ultimately where the proposal is for a hotel, and I don't see that a arts strategy within a hotel would align the proposal with the development brief, and therefore I don't see it as being reasonable. Any operation, I guess, any public business could have an art strategy located within it. It wouldn't change the nature of the building or the use, and ultimately the brief was seeking to deliver a cultural use as part of the development of the site. So therefore I don't think that it does what the reasoning is as stated in this condition.
Mr Steele,
so I
think ultimately that's going to be something we'll need to come to a view on, but if you have anything to add.
Well, simply, sir, very difficult to accept that, given the Council's previous position on which we won the competition, that it was appropriate for the arts and culture strategy as proposed at that time. And I do wonder whether Mr Nicholson has read the relevant documents that have been lodged at the inquiry and whether he has listened to the evidence about the matter, because the position in my submission is rather different to what he has suggested.
Okay, thanks all for that.
So just on my comment, I was reflecting on it, and I'm concerned there's the interesting precedent of the Green Travel Plan here. Many schemes will have these, and they will have aspirational percentages of numbers of enthusiastic cyclists and these sort of things. Now, there may be questions about whether those are aspirational, but they are at least measurable. And I was struck when writing this yesterday by the cross-examination by Mr Thompson about the nature of the art strategy for both schemes, and I had the opportunity of rereading them, and they do have a lot of aspirational language, and I'll touch on it in submissions, but it struck me that if we're going to have a strategy, it should have something which you can pin yourself to. And therefore that's why I've gone as far as said I think it's vague and uncertain, because you have to have something that a planning officer and not a cultural official could understand, and cultural officials, I'm related to a few of them, can be a little bit imprecise in this area.
Ultimately, that would be something that the Council would need to ensure that the strategy that's submitted for approval would include elements that would be measurable or otherwise enforceable in some way.
Very difficult, sir. That's why I asked the questions of Mr Gibb about the actual design features of the hotel. But again, it comes back to what's actually going to be built and what's been designed to be built. But beyond that, I very much leave it to Mr Nicholson to advise you about the practical difficulties of it all.
Yeah, I think it's the compatibility of public access with a six-star hotel, and given the plan of the building, I think it would be something that we would feel that there is an incompatibility there. And I think this condition would need to be very precise about how that could be achieved. I think we are finding it very difficult to see any wording that would not be unreasonable in imposing something upon a 6-star hotel operation to require public access, when in fact I would have thought the very nature of a 6-star hotel is a degree of exclusivity to that. So we have given consideration to how this condition could be reworded, but I don't think we are convinced that it can be shaped into something that would ultimately deliver what we were seeking to achieve through the development brief for the area.
Okay, I think we've heard what we need to hear on that. Mr. Nicholson, the next one is condition 21 that seems to have been scored out on this version. Is that right?
I think that was maybe for the listed building one, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay, I must confess I'm at a loss as to why that is crossed out, but it does appear to relate to the recording of the building, and that would be covered by.
Well, if it's anywhere, I think the listed building one would be more appropriate. Listed building application, not under the planning one.
Okay, so that either is or should be a condition on the listed building consent schedules.
Yeah, I need to look there when we get to that.
Okay.
One. Yes.
Might also be covered by condition 1, which allows for a programme of work including historic building recording and so on.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my thoughts exactly. It was already included within that. So condition number 22 is seeking additional detailed drawings and information relating to plant, chillers, ventilation equipment associated with the spa, to ensure that we have adequate information to give due consideration to how that would be designed, as there doesn't appear to be information in respect of that in terms of the exterior of the building in particular, and we would need to give that further consideration. That's to ensure that we can control the location and indeed the detail of that plant equipment to ensure we're safeguarding the neighbouring amenity, but it was deemed appropriate that there would be a specific condition relating to these detailed elements.
You're happy with that, Mr. Stone?
And similarly, there is not detailed information at this stage in relation to the kitchen ventilation system, and this is something that we would always seek to consider in detail to ensure that that is a suitable type of installation, and indeed any breakout into the external envelope of the building is given due consideration, and that is without a reason in this list that I have got. So, apologise. So that is really so that we can ensure, once again, it relates to neighbouring amenity, but ultimately we would also, given the listed nature of the building, be looking to ensure that how any such systems impact on the historic fabric.
Okay. And 24 we've already discussed, and I've noted that that's to be widened to cover construction noise and issues and so on. Yeah.
That's correct. Thank you.
Going on to the informatives, other than the standard informatives relating to commencement and duration and a site notice and so on, it's not DPEA or Minister's practice to include extensive lists of informatives. We think, given the specific circumstances of this case, though, we'd probably be minded to include the list as an appendix to our report, just so that if ministers, in the event of granting permission, do wish to attach these, they have them there. So in that light, I'm not sure that we need to discuss these in any great detail today.
I'll be satisfied with that. Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us on to the Scheme 2 schedule of conditions. Well, we might be able to do this quickly.
I'm just reminded that the informatives include reference to the need for the tram contribution, for example.
I'd noted that. We'll come on to that. I mean, as you'll know, Ministers' practice would be to issue a minded to grant to cover that rather than have it in informatives. And we will come on to that. Okay, could we go through the same schedule for Scheme 2? Clearly no need to go through each condition, but perhaps just to highlight any differences, if there are any, and I'm assuming there are.
Okay. Looking at the first condition, I think that's the inclusion of the including demolition text, which we were satisfied would be carried over into the Scheme 1.
Into the
Scheme 1. Second condition relating to materials, I think is exactly the same. Third, relating to the requirement for sample panels, is the same again. And condition 4, there is the inclusion of reference to conditions 2 and 3, which is an amendment to this application, which picks up what is already in the other one, the other application we've just been through. So that is a consistent approach. Condition 5, similarly wording, including the approval in writing by the planning authority to have a consistent approach across the two applications.
And we'll need the same implementation trigger in that condition.
Thank you. Condition 6 is the same amendment to the wording to clarify the date of the environmental statement. That's consistent across both applications. Condition 7. Okay, so we appear to have some different text in condition 7, which seeks to control the plant to be attached or located immediately adjacent to the existing and resultant buildings, hereby approved. So, if you could bear with me one moment while I confer with a colleague. Okay, apologies. I think this is additional text added to try and provide an additional degree of control over the location of any plant, and we would say that that would be appropriate to attach that to both.
To Scheme 1 also.
Both Scheme 1 as well. Yeah.
Can I just confirm that in terms of Scheme 1, the same wording should apply at the beginning? It should be prior to the first occupation of the development.
I would agree it's more appropriate to use the wording prior to the first occupation of the development. So moving on to condition number 8. So I think that is the same for both applications. And similarly, condition number 9 relating to the lighting strategy is the same in both. Condition 10 relating to landscaping scheme is the same for both applications, and condition 11 relating to tree removal is similarly the same in both applications. Condition 12, we would seek the same amendment to include the erection of tree protection fences. That would be consistent across both applications. Number 13. I think the introduction of the consultation with SMH is a consistent approach across both of the applications. It looks like the reasoning was attached to this application in the original version we circulated, but is now added into the other application for consistency. And we were going to add the historic building, the Hamilton building, into that reasoning.
Sorry, just to confirm, again, it's not just the reasoning, it's this body of the conditions, and it shouldn't just be the Hamilton building as well, because of the potential for the impact on the retaining walls or boundary wall at the southeast of the site.
Sir, if I could just intervene, this is one point I did cross-examine on, and CD 168 is the was the updated position regarding the rock removal strategy, and I note that in relation to that particular document, precision-controlled rock blasting remains as one of the possible rock pre-treatment methodologies, and within that particular document, under the precision-controlled rock blasting, it says the use of precision-controlled rock blasting involves controlled use of an explosive charge within the pre-dredge holes to loosen the rock mass. The design of the blasting pattern, sequence, and depth of removal (open brackets blast proposal document) will be prepared to ensure that the rock breaking does not impact on any nearby sensitive receptors and is all within all noise and vibration limits that would be agreed with relevant stakeholders. The blast proposal will be available for review and inspection by any interested party. It seems that in the context of the specific potential for the use of precision-controlled rock blasting, that it was envisaged in the environmental statement that part of the mitigation would involve a specific blast proposal document which would deal with these aspects. And I think, noting Historic Environment Scotland's concerns, that clearly that would be more than the Hamilton building. That could impact upon the walls as well. But it seems that that this condition perhaps doesn't go far enough, in that it should equally have perhaps a section that if precision-controlled rock blasting is included, that a blast proposal document shall be submitted and approved. And I think that's, I just highlight that because it, as I say, CD 168 seems to suggest that that might be something that is required if that particular method were to be utilised. It may, of course, it may not. That's still to be determined. But if it were to be, it appears that rock blasting might involve aspects which go over and above other methodologies or other approaches. And I think you don't want a surfeit of conditions. I think that's the trouble, is you end up with conditions for conditions. And it might be just trying to get a composite condition 13 that was slightly more all-encompassing and covered those matters would probably be more effective than a series of conditions on the matter. But it probably is, as it's currently drafted, whilst you could see it could encompass something like that, it perhaps is too loose in the terminology and not giving a degree of prescription that it's not only a methodology programme, but actually mitigation measures as well may have to be put forward if certain of the methods are to be deployed.
Thanks, Mr. Innes. What's the Council's view on that? Does the condition as drafted cover that eventuality in the Council's view?
The wording that we had used originally was really to address the concerns of Scottish natural heritage, and we discussed that condition and the wording of it with them, but widening the remit of that condition, we would need to think more carefully about other issues to be covered in it. Maybe give some thought to that.
I think we're talking about rock extraction methodology. I think we would be happy to look at the wording of conditions 13 and 14 to see if that can simply clarify the process for us obtaining that information, assessing it with due consultation, and indeed hopefully agreeing that and ensuring its implementation. But we would, if it was appropriate, we would be happy to look at a revised wording for 13 and 14 for consideration.
I think it would be useful if you could do that in conjunction with the appellant, also with Mr. Mackay.
Very happy with that, sir. However, I would have thought, and I do suggest, that 13 and 14 read sensibly and properly cover all of these issues anyway. And I note with interest the condition that was imposed on the trust, which is their condition 7, which is rather briefer than the conditions being proposed now, and their rock extraction was significant, to say the least.
Sir, I just say I think it's helpful for the Council to indicate that they will look again at the wording with now a clearer idea as to what it's trying to achieve. It is fair to say that the condition 14 in the last 3 lines says that once the methodology is approved, no alternative method of rock extraction shall be used without the prior written approval of the planning authority. So there is a strong degree of control embedded in the existing wording, but it may be useful to have a look at refining the overall effect of the conditions.
Yeah. I think, noting what Mr. Steele says, I'd still find it useful for the Council to review the wording of those 2 conditions and liaison with the parties.
Moving on to condition number 15, which relates to the public footway and carriageway works. I think that is consistent with within both applications. Condition number 16. I was slightly confused by the ordering of those conditions. I was looking for the condition to implement those works, with 15 requiring public footway and carriageway, 16 is that a duplication?
17
Okay,
seems
so
to be the implementation trigger.
17 appears to be the implementation for conditions 15 and 16. And 16 I think, is an additional condition on this application, which relates to the works in the junction of Regent Road and Regent Terrace, and requiring our further detailed consideration of those matters. So that is specific to this application.
I think that's we would definitely be looking for a condition there, because of course pedestrians use Regent Terrace, Regent Road, Regent Terrace. Traffic doesn't, because of course the road is closed off, but it is the main pedestrian thoroughway into the terraces from that side of the town. So we would be looking for very safe and secure access.
Presumably that's something that the Council would ensure through the approval of those details.
Absolutely, I would expect a safety audit to be part and parcel of those matters. Condition 18 relates to the underground storage tanks, the SUDs, which is consistent with condition 17 on the previous application. Condition 19 so in this application we have the construction environmental management plan added as a condition.
So presumably that just needs to be widened out in the same way as for Scheme 1.
Correct.
Yeah.
So condition 20 relates to the restriction of the number of bedrooms, and clearly this relates to 127 bedrooms as opposed to 147, and our comments would be as per the previous discussion. Similarly with 21, which relates to bedroom space within the Thomas Hamilton building, and again with relation to condition 22, the arts and culture strategy, the deletion of 23 is consistent with the other application. And condition 24 is consistent with condition 22 tabled for the other application. Condition 25 relating to kitchen ventilation is consistent with condition 23.
Okay.
And
that's it.
That is us on that.
Perfect. Okay. I think we should take a break now before moving on to the listed building consent conditions. So let's break until 11:50.
And there's 8 bullet points missing.
We're going to turn to the listed building appeal schedules of conditions, and then we'll pick up anything else that's hanging loose. I think there was an issue with potential condition on delivery times and so on, but we'll pick up those after we've dealt with listed buildings, and then we'll go on after that to the obligations. So can the Council do the same again and take us through the 2 listed building applications, starting with Scheme 1, 2076?
Well, I was wondering, sir, apart from condition 1, which was proposed by the Council, if HES and Mr Mackay might take the lead from 2 onwards.
I'm completely happy with that, yes. Is that okay with you, Mr Mackay?
Yeah, I'm happy to take the leads. I'm very happy to do so. I'm not sure it's only condition 1 that the condition put forward, but we can...
The conditions in red are largely those that have been suggested by HES, are they?
think that's right, but I think the council may have come up with the wording for some of them. Anyway,
Okay.
I'm happy to take the lead. That's
Okay, so we've got condition 1. That was as originally proposed. Any comments on that? Everyone seems happy with that. Okay. Then take us on to condition 2.
So, as you're aware, sir, under sections 14 and 15 of the Planning, Listed Building and Conservation Scotland Act 1997, there are quite wide powers to impose conditions when granting a listed building consent. And Mr. Robb has identified certain conditions which you might wish to consider recommending being included, having regard to the evidence that's been heard about this particular sensitivities of the Hamilton building. And I think probably it's useful for Mr. Robb to just talk us through each of those conditions in turn.
That would be helpful, thank you.
Hello. I think there's a certain degree of crossover between our suggested conditions and ones that the council had suggested in this process. Number 2, I think, may have come from the council, but it's one that we agree with certainly, which is just a detail for the new railings around the portico, which I think had been an issue. I think we were quite happy with the proposed design. It was really just to get a detail on fixing how they will actually look in
Any comment from the appellants? Happy with that? Anybody else?
Relaxed with that, sir, although I wonder about the wording in consultation with HES. That's the point of detail that's to be approved in writing by the planning authority. I would have thought is sufficient.
Yes, I always wonder about, it's a matter of the council who they consult with, but
Indeed,
you're not unhappy with it there.
Well, sir, I think on preference we'd probably prefer it's not there because it's only going to lead to complications as to who is agreeing or not. And in fact, it is the council that this should be submitted to and approved, and it's then for a matter for them how they deal with it.
Any view on being included or not in consultations? It goes back to the one on the historic building aspects where SNH were going to be involved on the planning schemes. Does HES want to be consulted, and have you got a view on whether you should be included in the condition?
I think if it's helpful for us, but we have no problem with the council doing it themselves, if that's more acceptable.
I think there are mixed views on this type of requirement in a condition. Clearly, as has been said, it is entirely up to the council who they consult with, and that doesn't need to be included in a condition. It doesn't preclude them from consulting with HES. Some people think it's useful to have that reminder for the council there, so that when something is submitted, they can see straight away that they should be consulting with HES. That's something that we'll come to a view on for all of these conditions.
Sorry, if I could just add, it's not our normal custom to deal with conditions. They are normally dealt with by planning authorities. So, if that's helped.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments on 2? Number 3 then?
I think 3 is very similar to 1 in the planning permission. The recording condition. If it's felt that the planning condition can cover that, then this probably might not really be required.
Any other comments?
So I would simply say that it is already covered and therefore it is not necessary. It doesn't meet the tests of the circular. And I should say, sir, to save time, most of the other conditions proposed by HES fall into exactly the same category, and one might wonder why they are there and whether they might consider withdrawing them in light of the earlier debate that we've had. I'm thinking in particular sort of rock extraction. There are numerous conditions about that.
What would be your view then as to whether they should be in the planning schedule or the listed building schedule? Or could some be more relevant to one than the other?
Well, sir, insofar as we have already discussed, if we take condition 3 as an example, that should be in the planning condition, and that has been proposed by the Council, and we have agreed with that, then it seems to me that should be an end of the matter, and there's no necessity to have it duplicated in the listed building consent.
Any view on that?
Mr. Robb's already indicated that if there is duplication, then there's no necessity for this particular condition. Insofar as the rock extraction conditions are concerned, we did discuss that earlier, and we are happy that those conditions are embedded within the planning conditions, so those particular conditions can come out. But there are other conditions that Mr. Robb would wish to talk you through.
Thank you.
Sorry, the only thing perhaps worth noting is that the circular only seems to apply to planning permission conditions, not to listed building conditions.
Okay. Move on then.
Condition 4 is the armorial plaque, which I think has to be removed in order to fit the access corridors on the rear north elevation. I think there was a little bit of discussion about what might happen to this. So this condition is really just trying to place down what actually happens to it. I think there was some discussion that it might be offered back to the school, or it might be displayed within the building. So it's really a condition just to make sure that its disposal or reciting is covered.
And that would be a matter for the planning authority in that case?
Again, yes. We would be happy.
Okay. Mr. Steele, did you want to say anything?
No, sir, you've already picked the point up about consultation with the HES. It's a matter for the planning authority.
Okay.
Number 5 is relating to the addition of the access wings to the Hamilton building. Again, it's just is looking for a little more detail than is shown on the design drawings.
On my schedule here, it says that council says that's not necessary. So.
That's correct. That's our view.
Anybody else?
We agree with the council, sir.
Okay.
Is the council's view that you have sufficient detail in the drawings already submitted?
Is that one?
It's a listed building application, and therefore the level of detail should be contained within the drawings for us to consider that impact on the historic structure. So we certainly would be concerned about if there's a requirement for an extensive list of conditions for us to consider a number of different matters, then I would suggest that means there's not enough information in the application in the first instance. So we're satisfied with what has been put in front of us and the way that we have assessed the impact on historic fabric.
That's not an issue, in other words, that you've raised with the appellants during the processing of the consent application?
No, that was raised. The way that the way that the wings attach to the building, and I was looked at in quite some detail with the appellants through the process.
And you're satisfied that you have sufficient information on that? HES don't seem to agree with that.
Well, I think it depends on how you deal with these things. I think it's quite common for further details to be requested when you're dealing with a listed building, and I suppose that varies between local authorities on how they deal with detailed considerations. We thought because the side elevations and the rear side elevations on Scheme 1 and the rear elevations on Scheme 2 are very significant, that further information on how they are joined to, how they are linked to the new extensions may be useful. And it will be information that will be available. The architects will have drawn up how the building is linked in more detail. It's not. I wouldn't say it was an additional to something that wouldn't be provided anyway.
That's obviously something we can look at and review the drawings again and see whether we think there's enough detail. Anything else from you, Mr. Steele?
Simply, sir, to say that we believe that there is more than enough detail and, of course, at a subsequent stage, building control will be involved.
Meaning?
If to ensure that the matter is done satisfactorily, building control will have to be satisfied in relation to building warrants and completion certificates, but so far as the detail is concerned or the method of joining, there is absolutely sufficient at this present time.
I'm just slightly worried that the historic building protection is now falls to listed building control, but that's not what you meant.
That may have been what the council meant in relation to the trust scheme, sir. I certainly don't think that's an appropriate approach at all. We have provided adequate detail in relation to the listed building, but as an additional factor to bear in mind, building control at a later stage will be involved.
Thank you. Should we move on to the next one, Mr. Rob?
The next one's very similar. It's very much similar. It's the links to the side elevation, which I mentioned earlier.
So the same considerations apply there?
Yeah. Yes.
And with number 7, I think we're up to?
7 is a salvage condition on elements that are being removed in Scheme 1, which are primarily the gate piers, the entrance to the site designed by Thomas Hamilton, and the gates. And it is really a question of how they can be reused either within the scheme or wider, being offered to salvage, just to ensure that they're not destroyed or put into landfill. We're not suggesting that they need to be required to be recited on the site necessarily, because we realise that it's a very tight development site and there isn't really space for that. So it's really if they can be reused on the site, and if not, we've suggested that they could be offered for wider salvage.
Are the appellants content with that?
Sir, as I read it, it does relate to proposed reuse within the overall development of the site. That appears in lines 5 and 6.
Yes, I can indicate, sir, that I think the council wanted the wording that's before you, if it's to be attached at all, although their position is it's not necessary. But for the reason identified by my friend Mr. Steele, HES would propose that in the 5th line after safe storage and the words where possible would be inserted.
So I simply note that the council say that this is not necessary or reasonable.
From the appellant's point of view, it's up to them what they do with gates and piers and railings that are no longer used on the site.
Well, sir, at the end of the day, the council are actually the owner of the site.
Okay. Anybody else on that? No?
I suppose to observe that it may well be there are historical features on the site that people want to retain for historical purposes, such as internal fittings of the Scottish Parliament building. There's nothing to stop the council, if permission is granted, before making arrangements to transfer the site to the appellant to give them to museums or such sort of things. So I'm not sure that we should worry about lots of different items that are on the site, but clearly it'd be nice to have things preserved. I'm not sure they're necessary to be planning conditions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nicholson.
Can I just add that we would just retain our position that we don't feel that this is indeed necessary given the nature of the fabric that we are talking about, and we would be concerned about imposing any requirement upon anyone to retain this material indefinitely in this case.
Thank you. So where were we up to? Condition 8?
Sorry, if I can just come in on that last one. I don't think the purpose of this condition was to see things being stored for forevermore. I think we've been in positions where elements of buildings have been stored with no reasonable chance of them being reused. It was really to offer them to salvage to be reused elsewhere, and I think perhaps the set of gates that used to be at McEwen Hall have been removed and reused by the university on Dalkeith Road as an example of a successful reuse of salvaged material.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
So can I just say, if that is so, then it maybe is that there's a further complication about the wording, because the requirement is salvage, safe storage and retention on site and proposed reuse. And I know what has been said about an alteration to the wording, but there still seems to be some kind of unnecessary conflict in all of that.
Could be an or instead of an and, maybe, or something. But your point's noted. Anyway.
I don't know, sir. Yeah.
8 and 9 come out.
So some of the same comments and considerations will apply with rock extraction?
Yes, sir. They would be covered by the planning permission now.
And that takes us to number 10, does it?
Yeah. Condition 10 is just asking for further detail of the restoration of elements in the main assembly hall. I think from the details that we had are quite small scale, and it was really just to ensure that the detail drawings are provided so we can see in more detail, the council can see in more detail how these elements will be restored. Again, I think these are drawings that would be done by the architects in any case.
So notwithstanding what was said earlier, you think in this particular case further detail would be required?
Well, I think, sir, it's this is part of the applicant's the conservation benefits, if you like, within the scheme to put back elements that were removed by the PSA, including the access stairs and the door to the portico. So, I think if a drawing is produced by the architects anyway to show how they're going to do it, I think it would be useful to check that to check it off against the original designs.
Mr. Steele.
Oh, sorry, sir, it's my fault. I really don't understand that. I simply note that the council say that this matter should be evident from the drawings, and our position is that the information is sufficient.
So everyone's happy that we consider that ourselves and make suitable recommendations if we get to that point to ministers. Okay, anything else on that first Mr. Building consent?
No, sir.
Are there any differences on the second one?
I think the only difference was the gate piers have been taken out from the salvage condition because they are retained in Scheme 2.
So are there any other comments on the Scheme 2 listed building consent, proposed conditions, suggested conditions? Good. I said we'd come back to any other conditions that we've missed out or come into people's minds, and we talked earlier about, I think it was service delivery times. Mr. McIntosh, you had something to say?
Yes, sir. I'm not instructed to suggest a condition because, as we'll deal with the submissions, the Community Council have viewed that you can't control this adequately to protect the character and amenity of the area. But in cross-examining Mr. Price, the Vice Chair of the Community Council, Mr. Steele raised the prospect of how the use of the Scheme 2 service door could be managed through conditions, and I felt it was therefore appropriate to raise the opportunity to have a discussion about this today, so that you have the matter in your minds.
Thank you. Is that something that the appellants have given consideration to, Mr Steele?
The short answer, sir, is we have not given detailed consideration to it, but it would, of course, be standard practice to have hours of delivery.
Presumably the same would apply in Scheme 1 in terms
Indeed.
of hours of delivery, or are the concerns not the same, given that the vehicles would be inside the building?
Absolutely. There is much less concern because in Scheme 1, if I remember correctly from the sections, the lorries reverse in, and presumably lots of exciting things happen inside. But there was talk, I think, from Mr. Mappin of 30 vehicles a day through the door. Now, I'm very happy for the appellants to consider it, but just for the purposes of fairness, perhaps it would be possible for the appellants to suggest such a condition before they produce their final submissions, so that we can make a comment, even perhaps a small one. From what Mr. Price tells me, there is a range of different approaches adopted by different hotels depending where they are in the residential core. So some are in very busy streets and some not. If perhaps the appellants could perhaps let you know a week before we produce our submissions on that small little point, that would be helpful.
Is this an issue that the Council would seek to control by means of condition? I mean, we do from time to time see delivery hours and so on being conditioned. Is that appropriate here, given the proximity of the houses in Regent Terrace? Or would you be relying on other nuisance legislation?
We've moved away from imposing conditions that seek to control delivery within an urban context. Our experience of trying to do that around maybe supermarkets in a residential area is that the knock-on effect is that the delivery vehicle will sit on the public highway until such time as they are allowed to offload. So if you put a restriction of 7 a.m, they will simply turn up at 6 a.m. and sit there with their engine running, causing a disturbance, or not causing a disturbance, as the case may be. So I think we're content that there are statutory powers that would allow us to control that through noise nuisance, or indeed potentially through the weighting restrictions on any part of the public highway, if deemed appropriate. So we don't see it as being an appropriate condition to use here.
Mr Steele, is that something that the appellants propose to follow up in an amended schedule of conditions or not?
Sir, to be frank, we hadn't intended. We had expected, if it was appropriate, the Council would have proposed such a condition, and if for reasons just explained they do not think it's appropriate, then so be it. If you, sir, jointly having heard the evidence, thought there was an appropriate condition, then so be it. We're pretty relaxed about the matter and are very content to leave it in your hands, but we do not have a specific proposal. I was, in truth, expecting something from the Council. Now, I was wrong.
The residents' group would have serious concerns about Scheme 1. I mean, we have serious concerns about both schemes, but the service entrance in Scheme 1, where every vehicle has to reverse, and now there's statutory legislation that they have to have some sort of klaxon noise while they do that, and that would be constant with every delivery beyond the normal clatter. And I can't think off the top of my head of another hotel in a vicinity, residential vicinity, that would be doing that.
And you agree with Mr McIntosh that there are also concerns around Scheme 2, or not? Are you less concerned about Scheme 2 than Scheme 1?
No, we're very concerned because they are, there's also talk about slightly altering the Regent Terrace, Regent Road area, because the service gate, I mean, I'm sure you'll look again when you have a visit, is actually really on the junction. They call it Regent Road, but you could argue it's really Regent Terrace. So, and again, this is, the main visual gateway to our street as well, which is going to look like the back lane.
Okay, I think we've taken that as far as we can, unless there's something additional.
No, sir. Just obviously there are non-audible reversing alarm devices, if that was thought by you to be appropriate, sir.
considering they're all going to have to cross over a pedestrian footpath, I think non-audible would probably be regarded as unsafe.
Okay. Were there any other matters that anyone feels has been missed from the list of conditions? No? Okay. Let's move on to the matter of the obligation and or the agreement. A couple of issues I think we need to address here. The Council is looking for what looks to be upfront payments in relation to a roads order, a TRO and a tram contribution. As far as I could see yesterday, those hadn't all been quantified, but quickly looking at the informatives that we've been provided with today, it looks to me as if it's 2,000 for each of the roads orders, and then a differing sum for Scheme 1 and Scheme 2 for the tram contributions. 63,600 for Scheme 1. And I'm not sure I'm following what the Council's looking for in regard to Scheme 2. There seem to be two elements of contribution mentioned there. So this is in informative 4 for Scheme 2. There's some reference to office use.
Okay, apologies for the confusion. The sums should simply read for tram contribution £32,429 for the 127 bedrooms and 63,600 for the 147. I think there's a bit of working has been included there whereby there's a deduction made for the existing office use on the site. So we would normally calculate the contribution required for the completed hotel and deduct the contribution that would be associated with the existing land use, which in this case would equate to £161,000 contribution. So that's a bit of working that's been included there. Okay. Apologies for that.
Okay, so 32429 for Scheme 2 and 63600 for Scheme 1. And are those figures consistent with the Council's supplementary guidance on contributions?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Is that the appellant's understanding, Mr. Steele?
I'm told so that we have accepted them. Is that correct? I'm just double checking along the bench. I have to say it seemed a bit curious to me that an extra 20 rooms that it almost doubles, but if it's been accepted, it's been accepted.
Okay, thanks for that. That takes us, well, we'll come on to the method of ensuring those payments, but it had occurred to me to look, or just to check whether the obligation and or agreements needed to cover any other issues. We've spoken about the conditions relating to the public realm works in Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. But yesterday I went looking at the Council's committee reports, and in your committee report, which is CD 425, for Scheme 2, I think that is, on page 57 there's mention of a Section 75 agreement being needed to cover the public realm works. Has the Council reviewed its position in regard to that? Yes.
line, sorry, if all of the public realm works are contained within the red line, then you wouldn't require that. The contribution required would just relate to the relevant traffic regulation orders.
Well, what's said in the committee report is the applicant would also be required to enter into a Section 75 agreement relating to the implementation of the proposed works to the public realm. And that seems to be in addition to the TRO. I took that to mean ensuring that it would happen.
Well, I think we just need to look back to the drawings. If there are any works outside the red line, then they would need...
Okay, I think we're definitely going to need clarification on that.
Okay, yes, so yes, as Mr Nicholson was saying, if it's on the public highway, if they're all contained within the public highway, in any case they could be secured by condition, and there are conditions there.
Okay, so the Council's position is Section 75 isn't needed for that?
Isn't needed. I can double check that with looking at the site plans for each scheme.
I think it would be useful for us just to have confirmation on that one way or another.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Sorry, there's a condition 16 in one of the schemes, which details of works to the public road and footway as approved, etc. Should be implemented.
Okay. Okay, so that takes us on to the issue of if we put the public realm works to one side, it looks as if we might not need a Section 75 for that. So we're looking only at the financial contributions. There's disagreement between the appellants and the Council as to whether that should be done via Section 69 or by means of a planning obligation under Section 75. Not sure. Mr Steele, do you want to say anything on that issue?
Well, sir, I wonder if it would be appropriate for the Council to outline their current thinking first.
Mr Thompson.
So the Council's current thinking is, as in our hearing statement, that we don't consider a Section 75 to be safe on the view that it may not be competent because of our interpretation of Section 75. If one interprets Section 75 as being capable only of being entered into by the owner rather than a long leaseholder of the affected land, so as to make it binding on singular successors entitled to the land, then the problem is that the Council is the owner and the planning authority, and the Council can't have an effective contract with itself. I understand that the appellant's position is that their long leasehold interest, once they have it, will enable them to come within the definition of owner within Section 75 so that they could enter into it. My view is that it's an as yet undecided question, and for that reason I wouldn't want to chance everything on an undecided interpretation. So the Council position is that it would favour purely financial contributions being dealt with by Section 69 agreement.
Ultimately, this may be something that will be left to ministers and their legal advisors, but we would normally want to give them our opinion on this. Looking at the circular on planning obligations, under the necessity test at paragraph 15, a sort of order of preference is set out, so planning conditions come first. Then, if a matter can't be covered by condition, we should consider alternative legal agreements. And Section 69 may or may not be mentioned there. And then the last port of call, if you like, is the use of a planning obligation. So my question is, do the appellants have any reason for not wanting to use a Section 69 agreement?
Well, sir, just to, I will answer that just in a moment, but our position is that a Section 75 would be entirely appropriate. We will be a long leaseholder of the property, and that falls within the relevant definition. So that's the first point about that, sir. But insofar as Section 69 is concerned, if you or ultimately the ministers are content with that and it secures what the council wish, then there should be no difficulty about that. If you just give me a moment. Yeah, so we're just treble checking there because, of course, the mechanics would be that we'd have to pay money up front before we're issued with the consent, but that apparently isn't a difficulty if that's the route that is selected.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr Steele. Noted. And the council is content that it would get what it needs in terms of contributions through using Section 69?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks all for that. Are there any other issues? That covers everything that I think we needed to discuss today. There's nothing more that we've missed, is there? No. Great. In that case, that concludes the hearing session, concludes the inquiry in its wider context too. We did sort of do our closings on that on Friday last week. I'm aware you weren't here, Mr Mackay, but I'm sure that what was agreed in terms of dates for closing submissions and so on had been transmitted to you. So,
Council,
yes, in terms of the schedules of conditions, how would it be if we gave the Council 2 weeks to sort of review that and discuss with parties, and then give the other parties a week to make any marginal comments in the columns? So the dates for that would be
9th of November, maybe, if we do 2 weeks on Friday.
9th of November and then the 16th of November for that.
That would seem absolutely fine. Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mr Thompson. So, in that case, thanks all for your assistance during the course of this long but interesting inquiry. Thanks very much, and we will await your closing submissions in due course. Thanks.
Thank you.